Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The mahogany-paneled room smelled of old money and fresh betrayal. Claire sat there, her back straight and eyes glinting with smugness as the lawyer shuffled through the papers. Her lips curled into a smirk that cut deeper than any blade. "He's gone now," she'd whispered to me that morning, the words slipping out like poison. "You're just a soldier now, Mark. That's all you'll ever be." My father's death had cracked something inside me, but it was her smile in this room that splintered me completely. The lawyer cleared his throat, his voice a hollow echo against the silence. As stated in the will, he began. But I wasn't listening. My eyes were locked on Claire, on the curve of her lips, the glint in her gaze. She thought she'd already won, that my father's fortune, his company, even his name, were hers now. She thought she'd buried me along with him. But she didn't know me at all. I clenched my fists under the polished table, nails biting into my palms to keep from showing the fury boiling inside. A soldier knows how to mask the battlefield in his mind. She'd forgotten that I spent years fighting wars she couldn't even imagine. And today, this was no different. Except the battlefield was my own life, and the enemy was the woman I once vowed to protect. I caught her eyes for a moment, my expression calm. She leaned back in her chair, that same smirk playing on her lips, as if she could read my thoughts and found them amusing. My father's old friends watched silently, the weight of unspoken words pressing the air flat. The lawyer's voice droned on, but my mind was elsewhere, charting the first steps of a war she had no idea was about to begin. Because today I would show her what a soldier truly is. Before we move ahead, I just want to say, your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now, be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference. Let's continue the story. I was never meant to be just a soldier. My father raised me to fight for what matters: family, loyalty, love. But Claire, she twisted those things into weapons. I remember the first time I saw her, laughing in the summer sun, hair wild and eyes bright. She was a flame I couldn't resist, a promise of warmth in a cold world. 12 years ago, I traded my uniform for a suit, for quiet nights at home and the sweet lie of peace. I thought that was enough. She made me believe it was enough. But a soldier never forgets the field. He just learns to bury it deep. And as I sat across from her in that sterile office, I saw the cracks in the facade she'd painted so carefully. In our home, she played the perfect wife. Soft kisses, shared dinners, and that laugh. God, that laugh. But at night, when she thought I was sleeping, she'd slip into the darkness. Whispers in the next room. A phone pressed to her lips. I'd tell myself it was nothing, work stress, a frenzier. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that love could be enough to silence the doubts gnawing at my gut. But a soldier knows the sound of lies, even in the dead of night. I watched her carefully, the same way I'd once tracked enemies in the desert heat. Every flicker of her eyes, every nervous shift of her hands, small tells that spoke louder than her honeyed words. I told myself I was being paranoid. That love meant trust. That she was my wife, and my wife wouldn't betray me. But deep down, I knew better. Because even a soldier's heart can only be blind for so long. In the beginning, there was only love. I still remember the first time I saw her smile, how it felt like the world paused, just for that moment. She laughed, and the sun seemed to burn a little brighter. Claire had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. And I was foolish enough to believe it. She said she loved the way I held her, the way I listened. "You're different, Mark," she'd whisper, fingers tracing the scars on my arms. "You see the world in a way no one else does." I wore those words like armor, let them sink into my bones. I thought if I loved her hard enough, deep enough, she'd never let go. Our nights were filled with quiet talks and shared dreams. She'd fall asleep with her head on my chest, breathing softly as if she was exactly where she was meant to be. And in those moments, I'd forget the wars I'd fought, the ghosts that haunted my sleep. In those moments, she was my home. But love, I learned, is a battlefield too. I thought I was fighting for her. For us. I thought every morning I woke up and chose her. Chose to be the man she deserved. I didn't see that she'd already chosen a different fight, a different prize. She was playing a game I didn't even know we were in. And the worst part? She did it all with that same soft smile. The one that made me believe in forever. I didn't know then what she was hiding. I didn't know that the woman I loved was already sharpening the knife she'd plunge into my back. But a soldier never stays blind forever. And when my eyes finally opened, everything changed. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, soft and golden, casting everything in a warm glow that felt almost holy. I stood at the stove, flipping blueberry pancakes, Claire's favorite, or so she used to say. She breezed in, wrapped in a robe that matched the color of her eyes, and kissed my cheek with a smile that was all surface, no soul. "Morning," she murmured, her voice sweet but distant. I forced a smile back, stirring the batter with careful precision. In that moment, it was easy to pretend that nothing had changed, that we were just another couple sharing the small, ordinary rituals of a life together. But even then, the cracks were there, silent and growing. We'd built this house together, a small place with a white picket fence and a garden sheet filled with roses. I used to think those roses were a symbol of us, something that needed care and devotion to bloom. Now, when I looked at them, I saw only thorns. She sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, fingers dancing over the screen like a secret lover. I watched her, the soldier in me cataloging every detail. The flicker of guilt that crossed her face, the way she'd quickly hide the screen when she saw me looking. I didn't say a word. "Not yet. Are you going into work today?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "I am," I said quietly. "Lots to do at the warehouse." She nodded absently, already half lost in whatever world existed on that tiny screen. My heart tightened in my chest, the weight of her indifference pressing down on me like a stone. This was the house we built together, every nail and beam chosen with love. But now, it felt like a prison, the walls closing in as her lies echoed in every corner. I watched her sip her coffee, her lips curving into a smile at something on her phone. I wanted to ask her what it was, who it was, but I didn't. A soldier knows when to hold his fire, when to wait for the perfect shot. And so I waited, watching the woman I once believed would stand by me forever. The house we built still stood, but the foundation was crumbling beneath us. My father's study smelled like old leather and pipe smoke, a comforting scent that had wrapped around me since I was a boy. I sat in his chair now, fingers trailing over the worn wood of the desk. His framed metals lined the walls, silent witnesses to a lifetime of quiet strength and unwavering honor. I closed my eyes and could almost hear his voice, low and steady, the voice that had taught me what it meant to stand tall. "A soldier's duty doesn't end on the battlefield, Mark," he'd once said, his hand resting heavy on my shoulder. "Out here, the battles are different, but the principles are the same. Protect what matters, fight for what's right." I opened my eyes, and there was Claire in the doorway, her presence an unwelcome shadow in this sacred space. She lingered there, her expression unreadable. "You spend a lot of time in here these days," she said lightly, but there was an edge to her voice, a flicker of something like suspicion. "It's my father's room," I replied evenly. "It reminds me of who I am." She laughed softly, the sound brittle. "You're a soldier, Mark. Nothing more." I let her words hang in the air, a challenge I refused to rise to. My father's shadow loomed large in this room, a silent guardian reminding me that strength wasn't always in words, it was in action. I reached for one of his old notebooks, the leather cover cracked and worn. I flipped through the pages, finding comfort in the neat lines of his handwriting. He'd left me more than a name and a company. He'd left me a legacy. Claire shifted, her eyes darting to the notebook, then back to me. "You're wasting your time," she said, her voice softer now, almost pitying. "None of this matters anymore." "It matters to me," I said simply. She turned away, her robe trailing behind her like a ghost. I watched her go, the quiet resolve building in my chest. My father's shadow stretched long and steady across the room, a promise that I wouldn't let her erase everything he'd built. She thought she could steal my future, but she'd forgotten that a soldier never fights alone. That night, the house was silent but for the soft creak of floorboards and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Claire lay beside me in the darkness, her breathing slow and even, a practiced calm. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts a restless storm that refused to quiet. I could hear the echoes of her laughter from earlier in the day, the way she'd smiled at me with that perfect mask. But beneath it, I knew there was another truth, one she thought I'd never see. I turned my head to look at her, the curve of her cheek in the faint glow of the moonlight. She was beautiful. She was poison. She shifted slightly, her hand brushing against mine. For a moment, I almost reached for her, almost let myself believe that we were still the couple we used to be. But then the memory of that message on her phone cut through the haze. "He's gone now. It's all ours." The words were a blade twisting in my gut, sharp and cold. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her. My feet moved like ghosts across the floor as I stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, every shadow a question I didn't yet have an answer for. I reached her phone on the dresser, my heart thudding in my chest. I scrolled through her messages, each one another nail in the coffin of the life I thought we shared. "Miss you. Can't wait until he's out of the way." My hands trembled, the soldier in me screaming for control. My breath caught in my throat, the weight of betrayal crushing me like a vice. In the darkness, the truth was laid bare. She was already gone, and I was just too blind to see it. I clenched my jaw, my resolve hardening with every word I read. The whispers in the dark weren't just in my head. They were real, and they were hers. I set the phone down, my mind cold and clear. She thought she'd already won, but she didn't know that a soldier learns to fight in the shadows. And now, I was done waiting. The next morning, the world was all light and laughter. Claire hummed softly in the kitchen, her voice as sweet as honey, but I couldn't taste anything but bile. I sat at the table, pretending to read the paper while her phone lay in my pocket, a ticking bomb of lies and whispered promises. She moved like nothing had changed, her robe slipping from one shoulder, that same soft smile painted on her lips. "Coffee, love?" she asked, her voice smooth and practiced. "Sure," I said evenly, my hands folded around the mug she set in front of me. My knuckles were white, but she didn't notice. She was too busy glancing at the empty spot where her phone should have been. Her eyes flicked to me, a quick flash of worry that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. "Have you seen my phone?" she asked lightly, but there was tension in the way her fingers tapped the counter. I shrugged. "Haven't seen it." She forced a smile, turning back to the sink. But I saw the way her shoulders stiffened, how her fingers tightened around the coffee pot like she wanted to shatter it against the sink. She was unraveling, and I watched it happen in real time. The phone in my pocket felt like a weapon, a loaded gun I wasn't sure I was ready to fire. Every vibration of a new message was another dagger in my chest, another reminder that the woman I loved was already gone. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I was a soldier, and soldiers know that timing is everything. I rose from the table, the phone still in my pocket, and walked past her. She turned to me, her lips parting as if to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. I pressed a kiss to her cheek, cold and distant. "Have a good day, Claire," I said quietly. Her eyes met mine, wide and searching. "You too," she whispered. I walked out of the house we built together, the phone burning in my pocket. I had the proof now. The only question left was how I would use it. Outside, the sky was a deep, cloudless blue, but it felt like a storm was brewing in my chest. I drove aimlessly at first, the phone heavy in my pocket like an anchor pulling me under. I thought about every smile, every soft touch, every lie she'd ever told me. The weight of it all pressed down until I couldn't breathe. I pulled over at the park, the place where we used to go on Sundays. Families laughed on the swings, kids ran through the grass. Life moved on, indifferent to the wreckage of mine. I sat on the hood of my truck, the phone in my hands, scrolling through the messages that had already burned themselves into my mind. I read them again and again, each word another crack in the life I thought I had. He'll never see it coming. I love you more than him. Soon, it'll all be ours. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone into the lake and watch it sink to the bottom. But that's not who I was. A soldier doesn't let his rage control him. He harnesses it, channels it into something sharper, something that cuts clean. I closed my eyes and thought of my father, his steady hands, his quiet dignity. He taught me that silence can be louder than any shout. That sometimes, the best weapon you have is patience. So I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. I let the silence stretch between us, thick and heavy. Let her wonder what I knew. Let her stew in the fear that I might know everything. I watched the families play until the sun dipped low in the sky, the golden light turning everything soft and warm. And in that glow, I found a calm I hadn't felt in days. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I wasn't just a soldier. I was a man who knew the truth. And that truth was a blade I would use when the time was right. That evening, the house smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken, Claire's specialty. She moved around the kitchen with the easy grace of a woman who had nothing to hide. The perfect wife, the perfect hostess. But every smile she offered me felt like a taunt, every word a carefully measured lie. "Long day?" she asked, her voice light as she set the table. "Yeah," I said simply. My tone was even, but she didn't miss the distance in my voice. Her eyes flickered, but she covered it with a small, practiced laugh. "You're always so serious," she teased, setting the plates down. "I swear, sometimes I think you're still back on the battlefield." "Maybe I am," I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked at me. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, fear, maybe, or just the recognition that she was losing her hold on me. But she recovered quickly, her lips curving into a soft smile as she sat across from me. We ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the low hum of the evening news in the background. I watched her carefully, noting every small detail, the way she twisted her napkin in her lap, the way her fork paused in midair when my eyes met hers. "Is something wrong, Mark?" she asked finally, her voice so sweet it made my teeth ache. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Why don't you tell me?" She blinked, her smile faltering for the briefest moment. "I don't know what you mean." I gave a small, humorless laugh. "Of course you don't." The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. She shifted in her seat, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "You're scaring me," she said softly. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Good." She swallowed hard, her eyes wide. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the truth in her gaze. The fear, the guilt, the knowledge that her empire of lies was starting to crumble. And in that moment, I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. The day of my father's funeral dawned with a chill that seeped straight into my bones. The sky was a bruised gray, heavy with clouds that threatened rain but never delivered. In the cemetery, rows of black suits and hushed voices gathered around the polished coffin, their murmurs like the whisper of wind through the dead leaves. Claire stood beside me, her gloved hand slipping into mine. It should have been a comfort, but it felt like a spider crawling across my skin. Her eyes were bright with tears, perfect, shimmering tears that she'd practiced 100 times in the mirror. She leaned in close, her perfume cloying, her voice low and sweet. "He was a good man," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. I said nothing. My father had been more than a good man. He'd been the backbone of everything I was, everything I believed in. As the minister spoke of his life and his legacy, I stared at the coffin, willing myself to remember the man he'd been, not the way he'd left me. Strong, steadfast, a man who believed that truth was a shield and lies a poison. Claire squeezed my hand a little too hard, her nails digging into my palm. Her tears fell in perfect time with the minister's words, but her eyes were dry when she thought no one was looking. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, the way she dabbed at her cheeks with a handkerchief that never needed it. After the service, people came to offer condolences, pats on the shoulder, murmured prayers. Claire played the grieving widow with a grace that made me sick. She smiled through her tears, nodding politely, thanking them all with a voice as smooth as glass. But every time she looked at me, I saw the truth flicker behind those honey brown eyes. When the last mourner had drifted away, she turned to me, her hand resting lightly on my chest. "We'll get through this, Mark," she said softly, her fingers tracing my lapel. "We'll be stronger for it." I looked down at her, the weight of the phone in my pocket a silent vow between us. "Oh, we'll get through it," I said. "One way or another." She smiled then, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And I knew this was only the beginning. A week after the funeral, the lawyer's office was a quiet trap, paneled in dark wood and the scent of old leather. The air was too still, too heavy with secrets. Claire sat beside me, legs crossed elegantly, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor as she shifted in her seat. She wore black, of course, a velvet dress that clung to her like a second skin. The lawyer, a stooped man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat as he spread the papers out before us. His voice was a low drone, words measured and precise. "As executor of your father's estate, it is my duty to read his final wishes aloud," he began. Claire's eyes glittered like polished stones. She leaned back in her chair, the picture of calm, her fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. She thought she knew exactly what was coming, that everything would fall neatly into her lap, just as she'd planned. She thought she'd already won. I sat silent, my hands folded in my lap, watching her carefully. The lawyer began to read, his voice echoing off the darkwood. "To my son, Mark," he said, "I leave the company I built with my own two hands. May you honor it as I have." Claire's smile faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it. The lawyer continued, his tone steady. "To my loyal employees, who stood by me through every storm, I leave a portion of my estate as thanks for their service." I felt the shift in the air, a tightening around Claire's shoulders, the way her fingers stilled on the chair. She leaned forward slightly, her breath caught. "And to Claire," the lawyer said, pausing to look her dead in the eye, "I leave nothing." The silence was deafening. Claire's face went white, her lips parting in a soft, stunned gasp. "There must be some mistake," she breathed, her voice trembling with forced calm. He wouldn't leave me with nothing." The lawyer folded his hands over the will, his expression unreadable. "There is no mistake, Mrs. Adams. Your husband's father was very clear in his wishes." I watched the color drain from her face, the mask slipping, just for a moment. And in that crack, I saw the real Claire, the one who thought she could outmaneuver everyone, even the dead. I leaned back in my chair, my voice quiet but sure. "You were right, Claire," I said. "He was a good man, and he saw you for exactly who you are." The lawyer's office emptied out slowly, the echoes of polite conversation and thinly veiled curiosity hanging in the air long after the last door clicked shut. Claire sat across from me, her face pale and set in a mask of controlled fury. She didn't look at me as she gathered her purse and stood, her movements sharp and deliberate. I rose with her, slipping the phone back into my pocket. She glanced at me then, her eyes flashing like a cornered animal. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I know," I said calmly. "But it's not your game anymore, Claire." She stepped closer, her perfume thick in the close air. "You think you've won because of a piece of paper?" Her voice was soft, almost pitying. "You don't know me at all." I leaned in, close enough that she could feel the quiet power in my voice. "Oh, I know you better than you think. I know every lie you've told, every whisper you thought I'd never hear." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I saw the fear flicker across her face, gone in an instant, replaced by that cold, practiced smile. She turned away, her heels clicking across the marble floor with each step a declaration of war. As she walked out, I sat back down in the heavy leather chair, the weight of the phone in my pocket a steady comfort. I knew this was only the first volley, the first shot fired in a battle that would leave no room for mercy. She built her empire on lies and sweet promises, on whispers in the dark and stolen glances. And now, like sand slipping through her fingers, it was all starting to crumble. I took a slow breath, the quiet of the office wrapping around me like a shield. My father's portrait hung over the fireplace, his eyes calm and resolute, a reminder of the legacy I'd been handed. I thought of the years I'd spent fighting for other people's freedom, other people's lives. And now, the war had come home. Claire thought she could break me, that I was just a soldier, obedient, loyal, blind. But she was about to learn the hard truth. A soldier never stops fighting. The next morning dawned with a heavy stillness, the kind of air that pressed in around you like a warning. I was in my father's office, the oak desk a fortress between me and the chaos that was sure to come. The door swung open without a knock, and in he walked, Alex, the man who thought he could take my place in my own life. He was taller than I remembered, with that easy, practiced smile that had probably charmed Claire the same way it had always charmed everyone else. His eyes flickered around the room, taking in the quiet power of it, the history that lined every wall. "Mark," he said smoothly, his voice like silk over a knife's edge. "I hear there's been a misunderstanding." I leaned back in the chair, my hands steepled in front of me. "You think this is a misunderstanding?" I asked softly, my tone calm, but every word a hammer. Alex's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, man. We're all adults here. Let's not let an old man's paranoia get in the way of what's best for everyone." I felt a slow burn rise in my chest, but I didn't let it show. "You're talking about what's best for you, Alex. Let's not pretend it's anything else." He shrugged, stepping closer, his hands in his pockets like he was just a friend stopping by. "Claire and I, we're in love, Mark. She never wanted to hurt you. But your father, you didn't see what we have. He was stuck in the past. She didn't want to hurt me?" I echoed, my voice a quiet challenge. "Then why the lies? Why the secrets? Why make me the fool?" For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, maybe even regret. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that smooth, polished charm. "Look, Mark, you're a soldier. You know when to cut your losses. This doesn't have to get messy." I stood slowly, letting the silence between us stretch out like a blade. "Oh, it's already messy, Alex. And I'm just getting started." He held my gaze for a long moment, then smiled again, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "We'll see about that, soldier." He turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. I watched him go, the calm fury building in my chest like a storm. He thought he could waltz into my life and take everything from me. He was about to learn that soldiers don't just fight, they finish wars. After Alex left, the house felt too quiet, the air thick with the echoes of his arrogance. I walked through the rooms, every picture on the walls a reminder of the life I thought I had, of the love I thought was real. My father's medals, the old family photos, the rose garden outside the window, each one a memory, each one a piece of the fortress I'd built around my heart. I found Claire in the garden, pruning the roses with a calm, deliberate grace. She looked up when she heard me, her eyes wide and soft. "Mark," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "We need to talk." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded, crossing my arms over my chest as I leaned against the doorframe. She set the shears down carefully, brushing dirt from her hands. "I know this is hard," she began, her tone gentle, practiced. "But Alex and I, we didn't plan for this to happen." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't plan it?" I asked, my voice low. "Then why does it feel like every step was a trap?" She flinched, just for a moment, then forced a smile. "I didn't want to hurt you, Mark. I still care about you. But we're different people now. You're always so serious, so controlled. Alex makes me feel alive again." Her words cut deeper than any blade. But I didn't let it show. I pushed away from the doorframe, stepping closer, my voice steady. "You want to feel alive, Claire? Fine. But you're going to feel the weight of every choice you've made." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing, the softness gone. "You can't scare me, Mark. I'm not afraid of you." A cold smile curved my lips. "You should be." She turned away, her shoulders stiff, her hands shaking as she reached for the shears again. I watched her for a moment, the calm fury coiling in my gut. She thought she could control the storm she'd unleashed. She was about to learn that when you betray a soldier, you're not just breaking a man's heart, you're starting a war. That night, I sat in my father's study, the soft lamplight casting long shadows across the worn wood and leather. I could almost hear his voice in the crackle of the old fireplace, his calm, steady tone a balm to the chaos in my mind. I opened the drawer he'd always kept locked, the one he'd told me about when I was still just a boy with two big dreams and two small hands. Inside, I found the envelope, yellowed with age, the wax seal still unbroken. My fingers traced the edges, my breath catching in my throat. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter, my father's careful script filling the page. If you're reading this, Mark, it means the world has turned against you, and you're going to feel like you're standing alone. But remember, you're my son. And a soldier never stands alone, not really. My throat tightened, the weight of his words wrapping around my heart like steel. He'd seen it all coming in his quiet, watchful way. The lies, the betrayal, the war that was already brewing in my own home. He'd left me more than a company or a house. He'd left me a plan, a path forward that no one, not even Claire, could see coming. The letter ended with a single line, written in a hand that never shook. Trust your instincts, son. And never forget, she's not the only one who knows how to play this game. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it back into the envelope. My father's last laugh, a final reminder that he'd been watching all along, even as the world crumbled around him. I leaned back in the chair, the firelight flickering over the metals that lined the wall. Claire thought she had the last word, that her empire of lies would bury me along with my father. But she didn't understand. She was playing a game of hearts and masks. I was playing for keeps. The next day, I returned to the lawyer's office, this time alone. The room felt different without Claire's cold presence filling it, the dark wood and faint scent of dust somehow comforting in its quiet strength. The lawyer looked up as I entered, his face as composed as ever, but there was something new in his eyes, a flicker of something he hadn't shown before. "Mr. Adams," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his. "I was hoping you'd come back. There's one more thing." I sat, my pulse steady despite the storm still raging in my chest. "One more thing," I echoed, my voice calm. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a slim envelope, the edges crisp and the seal unbroken. "Your father left this codicil to his will, meant for your eyes only. He didn't trust anyone else with it." I took it from him, the paper cool against my fingertips. My father's handwriting stared back at me, each letter carved with purpose. "For my son, Mark, when the world turns to lies, this is the truth." My heart hammered as I read, every line a testament to the man who'd seen through every game and every mask. It wasn't just about the money or the company. My father had known Claire's plan long before I did, her affair with Alex, the fake smiles, the whispered promises that were never meant for me. He'd left me more than an inheritance. He'd left me a blueprint to take back what was mine. The codicil laid it out in stark terms, proof of Claire's betrayal, hidden bank accounts, offshore holdings she thought no one knew about. Everything meticulously documented, every loose thread tied tight by the man who'd taught me how to fight even when the odds were stacked against me. I closed the envelope slowly, my resolve hardening with every word that burned in my mind. Claire thought she was the queen of this game, but my father had been the king, and he'd left me the checkmate move. I stood, my voice quiet but unyielding. "Thank you," I said to the lawyer. He nodded, understanding that what passed between us wasn't just about the law. It was about legacy and justice. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, I felt the weight of my father's final gift settle around me like armor. The battlefield had shifted, and I was ready. The sun was setting as I drove home, the sky painted in shades of crimson and gold. I could feel the codicil in my pocket, a promise and a weapon in one. My father's final move was in my hands now, and I could almost hear his voice in the hum of the engine, steady and sure. Claire was waiting in the living room when I got home, her posture too casual, her smile too bright. "You're late," she said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of a wine glass. "I had some business to take care of," I replied, my tone even. I moved past her, letting the silence stretch between us like a live wire. She followed me, the glass clinking softly in her hand. "You've been distant, Mark," she murmured, her voice sweet and coaxing. "I miss how we used to be." I turned to face her, my eyes steady. "Do you?" I asked quietly. She blinked, her smile faltering just a little. Of course I do. We're a team. Always have been. I stepped closer, the distance between us a breath of air. A team, I repeated, my voice calm. Like you and Alex? Her eyes widened, the glass slipping in her hand and shattering on the hardwood floor. What are you talking about? She stammered, her face pale. I'm talking about the money, I said, my words cold and precise. The hidden accounts. The offshore funds. The way you tried to bury my father's legacy under your lies. She stared at me, her lips parted, her eyes wild with something that wasn't quite fear yet. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. I smiled then, but it didn't reach my eyes. I know exactly what I'm saying. And I know exactly who you are, Claire. For a moment, the mask slipped. Her face twisted, her voice dropping to a hiss. You think you're so clever, Mark. But you're just a soldier. You don't have what it takes to beat me. I stepped closer, my breath calm and even. Maybe, I said softly. But I have the truth. And that's all I need. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. I watched her go, the pieces of the shattered glass glittering at my feet. The stakes were no longer just about love or betrayal. This was about taking back everything she tried to steal from me, and proving that a soldier's heart can't be broken, only sharpened. The next morning, I made a call to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Jack had been my spotter overseas, a man who could see through the fog of war better than anyone. Now, he was a lawyer, his skills just as deadly behind a desk as they'd once been behind a scope. When he answered, his voice was low and steady, the same tone that had once talked me through fire and fury. Mark, he said, his voice a quiet promise. What's going on? I need your help, I said, and I needed to be quiet. He didn't ask questions. He never did. You got it, he said. Where do we start? I laid it out for him. Every detail, every secret Claire thought was buried. The codicil, the offshore accounts, the betrayal that cut deeper than any bullet wound I'd ever taken. And when I was done, there was a long silence on the line. She underestimated you, he said finally, his voice soft with the weight of old truths. She doesn't know what she's up against. She thinks she does, I said, but she's about to find out how wrong she is. We met that night in his office, the city skyline bright beyond the tall windows. He had the codicil spread out on the desk, every line of my father's final plan a map of retribution. Jack moved with the same precision I remembered, his hands steady as he gathered the evidence, his eyes sharp as he read between the lines. You've got her, he said quietly, a ghost of a smile on his lips. This isn't just about revenge anymore, is it? I shook my head. It's about honor. About my father. About everything she tried to destroy. He nodded, his expression hardening. Then let's finish this, brother. As we worked into the night, the shadows around us seemed to recede, replaced by the quiet certainty of men who'd faced worse and survived. Claire had tried to tear everything from me, my name, my family, my future. But she'd forgotten that a soldier never stands alone. And I wasn't done fighting. By dawn, Jack and I had assembled every scrap of evidence like a battle plan laid out on the war room table. The codicil, the bank records, the messages she'd thought were secret. It was all there, lined up like ammunition for the fight ahead. The hum of the city outside was just noise. In this room, there was only focus, only purpose. Jack sat back, his fingers steepled under his chin. This is enough to bury her, he said quietly, his eyes never leaving the files spread between us. You're sure you want to go all the way? I met his gaze without hesitation. She tried to destroy everything my father built, everything I believed in. I'm not backing down now. He nodded, that ghost of a smile back on his lips. Good, because once we do this, there's no turning back. I reached for the codicil, feeling the weight of my father's final words in my hands. Every line of his careful script was a reminder that this fight was bigger than just me. It was for the man who'd taught me what it meant to stand tall, even when the world tried to break you. We spent the morning crafting the plan, every detail fine-tuned like a precision strike. Jack would handle the legal side, motions, injunctions, the quiet moves that would freeze Claire's assets and cut off every escape she tried to build. I would handle the rest, uncovering every lie, turning every whispered secret into a blade she couldn't see coming. When the plan was finally set, we sat in silence for a long moment, the gravity of it filling the room like the weight before a storm. "You ready for this?" Jack asked, his voice low. I took a slow breath, feeling the calm that always came before a fight. I'd been ready since the day she thought she could break me. We rose together, the quiet confidence of men who'd faced down worse than this, and walked away. I left his office with the evidence in my hand, the knowledge that I was no longer fighting alone. Claire thought she had all the power, but she was about to learn that a soldier's arsenal is never empty. That evening, I returned home to a house that felt colder than it had ever been. Claire was waiting in the kitchen, her smile practiced, her eyes bright with false warmth. "You're home late," she said, her voice soft as silk. "Rough day at work?" I walked past her, setting my jacket down with deliberate care. "Just tying up some loose ends," I said. My voice was calm, every word measured. She was good at reading the slightest tremor, the smallest crack. I gave her nothing. She followed me into the living room, her footsteps light on the polished floors. "You've been so distant, Mark," she murmured, reaching for my hand. "I know things have been hard since your father died, but we're still a team, aren't we?" I looked down at her fingers on mine, the delicate curve of her nails, the way she wore that mask of concern so well. For a moment, I almost wanted to believe it, almost wanted to let her lies wrap around me like they used to. But I'd seen too much, and there was no going back. I pulled my hand away, my voice quiet. "A team," I said softly. "That's what you keep calling it." She hesitated, her smile faltering. "Mark, you've built this house of cards, Claire," I said, my words slicing through the calm. "But you're about to watch it come crashing down." She blinked, her lips parting in a small gasp. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I could see it in her eyes, the first flicker of doubt, the first crack in the armor she'd wrapped around herself. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't know how close I was to tearing it all apart. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. "You're being dramatic, Mark. You're still so military. Always seeing threats where there aren't any." I leaned in, my voice a whisper. "And you're still playing games you can't win." She stepped back, her face pale in the lamplight. I watched her go. Every step she took another card slipping out of place. The house of cards she'd built was already falling. She just didn't see it yet. The days that followed were a blur of movement and quiet planning. I spent my hours at the office, working with Jack to ensure every piece of the puzzle was locked in place. At night, I returned home to Claire's hollow smiles and careful touches, each one a performance, each one a lie she still clung to like a lifeline. I watched her carefully, noting the small signs she was starting to unravel. The way her fingers trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she avoided my gaze when the phone buzzed in her pocket. She was a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, and she knew it. One evening, as I was going through some papers in the study, she appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "You're shutting me out," she said quietly, her voice low and accusatory. "I can feel it." I looked up at her, my expression unreadable. "You made your choice, Claire," I said. "You don't get to act like the victim now." Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "You think you're so noble, don't you? So righteous. But you're just like him, like your father. Always so sure you're better than everyone else." I stood, closing the file slowly. "No," I said, my voice calm. "I'm nothing like him. I'm better." She laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the quiet. "You're a fool if you think you're going to win this, Mark. You don't know how deep this goes." I stepped closer, my voice low and even. "I know more than you think. And I'm done playing your games." For a moment, she stared at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, her shoulders stiff, her footsteps quick and sharp. As the door closed behind her, I felt the weight of it all settle in my chest. The storm was coming, and there was no turning back. But I wasn't afraid. I was a soldier, and I was ready. The next morning, I sat in my father's office, the codicil spread out in front of me, my fingers tracing the lines of his careful script. The world outside was bright and indifferent, but in here, it felt like a storm was gathering. Every word on that page was another strike of thunder, another flash of lightning that promised the truth would soon break free. Claire tried to pretend nothing had changed. She moved through the house with quiet grace, her smile sweet and practiced. But I saw the tension in the way she paused before speaking, the way her eyes darted to me when she thought I wasn't watching. She was unraveling, piece by piece. That evening, Jack called with a low, steady voice. "It's time," he said. "Everything's ready. The lawyers, the documents. Once we file this, there's no going back." I felt a calm settle over me, a soldier's calm, honed in the fire of battles I'd never spoken of. "Then let's do it," I said. "Let's end this." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stepped outside, the air sharp with the promise of rain. I walked through the garden Claire had once tended so carefully, the roses bright and defiant in the fading light. I thought of all the times I believed her laughter, all the nights I'd let her lies slip past my defenses because I wanted to believe that love was enough. No more. The papers Jack had prepared were ironclad, proof of her betrayal, her theft, every dollar she thought she could hide. Offshore accounts, secret partnerships, even the forged signatures she thought no one would ever find. It was all there, waiting for the moment I would drop it at her feet like a final reckoning. As I stood there in the garden, I could almost feel my father's presence at my shoulder, quiet and unwavering. "A soldier never quits," he'd said once. "He never backs down. Not when there's something worth fighting for." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words like a shield around my heart. Tomorrow, the world would see the truth, and Claire would finally learn what it meant to wage war with a soldier. The following day dawned crisp and bright, the sky clear as glass. I moved through the house with deliberate calm, every step measured, every breath controlled. Claire was in the kitchen, her hair pulled back, her fingers tied around a coffee mug. She looked up as I entered, her smile automatic, but her eyes were wary. "You're up early," she said softly. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the smell rich and bitter in the still air. "Lots to do," I said simply, my voice calm. She watched me carefully, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. I sat across from her, my hands wrapped around the warm mug. "We need to talk," I said. She tilted her head, her smile tight. "About what?" "About everything," I said. "About what happens next." She laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You're being so dramatic, Mark. I told you, this doesn't have to be messy." "But it is messy," I said quietly. "Because you made it that way." Her fingers tightened around the mug, her knuckles white. "I did what I had to do," she snapped. "You wouldn't understand." I leaned back in my chair, my gaze steady. "I understand more than you think, Claire. And I'm done pretending." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have time for this," she said, her voice cold. She turned to leave, but I caught her wrist, my grip firm but gentle. "Sit down," I said. My voice was low, but there was no mistaking the steel in it. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for something she couldn't find. Finally, she sank back into her chair, her shoulders tense. I took a slow breath, the calm before the storm. "Tomorrow," I said, "everything comes to light. Every lie, every betrayal, every secret you thought you'd buried. It's over, Claire." For a moment, she looked at me with something like fear in her eyes. Then she straightened her shoulders, her chin lifting in defiance. "We'll see," she said softly. "Yes," I said, my voice calm and final. "We will." The next morning felt like the calm before a battlefield engagement. The air was electric, each breath carrying the weight of everything that was about to come crashing down. I dressed with deliberate care, a dark suit, my father's watch on my wrist, a reminder of the man who had always believed in quiet strength. The office was quiet when I arrived, Jack waiting by the window, the city spread out behind him like a stage. He turned as I entered, his eyes steady. "It's time," he said simply. I nodded, feeling the weight of it settle around my shoulders like armor. "Let's do this." We walked together into the boardroom, the door closing behind us with a quiet finality. Claire was already there, sitting at the far end of the table. She wore a tailored dress, her hair perfect, her smile tight and brittle. Alex was beside her, his expression smug, his hand resting lightly on her arm. They looked so sure of themselves, so certain that their empire of lies would hold. But today wasn't just another day. Today was the day everything changed. I laid the file on the table, the evidence spread out like a map of the battlefield. This, I said quietly, is the truth. Claire's eyes flicked to the papers, her smile faltering. What is this, Mark? She asked, her voice too calm. It's everything, I said. The forged signatures, the hidden accounts, the lies you've told, and the promises you broke. Alex shifted beside her, his confidence flickering. This is nonsense, he snapped. You're grasping at straws. I met his gaze evenly. No, I'm holding the rope you're both hanging from. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Claire's face went pale, her fingers curling into fists in her lap. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. It's over, I said. You've spent years building this house of lies, but today it all comes down. Claire's lips parted, her voice a whisper. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. I'm taking back what's mine. And I'm ending this. For good. The room was silent as the weight of my words settled in the air. Claire's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the truth in them, fear, regret, and the cold certainty that she'd lost. The day of reckoning had come, and I was ready to see it through. The tension in the boardroom was thick enough to choke on. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, slicing across the table in harsh white lines that seemed to spotlight every shift, every breath. Claire sat across from me, her back straight, her eyes hard and defiant. Alex shifted beside her, his jaw tight, fingers drumming a restless beat against the polished wood. Jack began the meeting with the calm authority of a man who knew he held every card. Let's be clear, he said evenly, his tone cutting through the silence. What we're discussing here isn't open for debate. The evidence speaks for itself. Claire's fingers curled around the edge of the table, her knuckles white. This is absurd, she snapped, her voice low but trembling. You're twisting everything. I met her eyes, my voice quiet and steady. No, Claire. I'm just showing the world what you really are. Alex leaned forward, his lips curling into a sneer. You think you can scare us with a few pieces of paper? You're nothing, Mark. You're just a washed-up soldier clinging to the past. I felt a flicker of anger in my chest, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, my gaze never leaving his. You're right, I said softly. I am a soldier, and I know exactly how to finish what I start. Jack began laying out the documents, bank statements, forged signatures, messages that traced every step of their betrayal like a map drawn in ink and blood. With each page he turned, I watched Claire's mask crack a little more, her breathing quicken, her lips parting in small, panicked gasps. This isn't real, she whispered at one point, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. This can't be real. But it was. Every lie she'd told, every secret she thought she'd buried, it was all there, laid bare for the world to see. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back. The woman who once held my heart in her hands was now just another enemy on the field, and I was done holding back. The room fell into a heavy silence after Jack's final words, the weight of the evidence pressing down like a stone. Claire's hands trembled on the table, her shoulders tense beneath the sleek fabric of her dress. She tried to speak, but the words died on her lips, swallowed by the undeniable truth laid out in front of her. I watched her carefully, every flicker of her eyes, every shallow breath. The woman who had once been the center of my world was cracking apart at the seams, her lies unraveling faster than she could catch them. Alex shifted beside her, his expression hard, but his eyes betrayed him, darting back and forth, calculating, searching for an escape that didn't exist. You think you can just take everything, Mark? He said finally, his voice sharp. You think this makes you some kind of hero? I leaned forward, my voice low and calm. This isn't about being a hero, Alex. It's about the truth. And the truth doesn't need permission. Claire flinched, her fingers twisting in her lap. You don't understand, Mark, she said, her voice brittle. I did what I had to do. I was trying to protect us. Protect us? I echoed, the disbelief in my voice cutting deeper than any accusation. By lying? By stealing? By selling out everything we built together? Her eyes filled with tears then, real or imagined. I couldn't tell anymore. You don't know what it's like, Mark, she whispered. Always living in the shadow of your father. Always second to his name. I know exactly what that's like, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. But I never let it turn me into a liar. The room was quiet again, the only sound the soft rustle of the papers between us. I felt the finality of it settle in my chest, the knowledge that the woman I once loved was gone, replaced by someone who would rather cling to her lies than face the truth. I stood slowly, my hands steady at my sides. This ends now, I said. It's over, Claire. And as I turned to leave the room, I knew it was true. The lies had been exposed, the masks ripped away. There was nothing left but the truth, and the woman who had lost everything by trying to bury it. The aftermath of the confrontation unfolded like the slow unraveling of a knotted thread. Claire was a statue of disbelief, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, while Alex's smirk dissolved into something cold and calculating. He turned to her, his voice low but dripping with venom. You told me he'd never find out, he said, each word a lash. You said it was safe, that he was too blind to see. Claire's eyes went wide, her lips parting in a soft, desperate gasp. Alex, please, don't, he cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. Don't even try to spin this. You played me as much as you played him. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his expression twisted with anger and disgust. I trusted you, he spat. I believed every word you said, and you used me to build your little empire of lies. Alex, he let out a short, bitter laugh. Save it. You're on your own now. He turned his back on her, the betrayal in his voice echoing in the heavy silence of the room. I watched her shoulders slump, her hands falling uselessly to her sides. The woman who had once seemed untouchable was now just a shell, stripped of her allies, her schemes laid bare. For a moment, she looked at me, her eyes pleading. But I didn't flinch. There was no pity left in me, no mercy for the woman who had tried to burn everything I held dear to the ground. Alex walked out without another word, the door clicking shut behind him like the final nail in her coffin. Claire sagged into her chair, her face pale and drawn, the weight of her betrayal finally settling on her shoulders. I stood in the doorway, the cold satisfaction of victory tempered by the ache of what we'd both lost. You thought you could have it all, I said softly. But all you have now are the ashes of the life you tried to steal. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The silence between us was louder than any shout, a testament to the price of her lies and the truth that would never be buried again. The house was silent after Alex's departure, the echoes of his footsteps fading like the last breath of a dying lie. Claire sat at the end of the long table, her shoulders slumped, her fingers trembling as they traced the grain of the wood. The weight of everything she tried to hide pressed down on her, and for the first time, I saw her for what she was, not the queen of her own kingdom, but a woman drowning in the ruins of her own making. I stood across from her, my arms folded, my heart a steady drumbeat of cold resolve. It's over, Claire, I said, my voice low and unwavering. There's nothing left to hide. She lifted her eyes to mine, and in them, I saw the flicker of the woman I'd once loved, a woman who had laughed with me under the summer sun, who had whispered promises into the dark. But that woman was gone, buried under layers of deceit. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I never meant for it to get this far. I let the silence settle between us for a moment, the weight of her words pressing against the walls. Then why? I asked quietly. Why did you lie? Why did you betray everything we built? Tears welled in her eyes, and she pressed her lips together, her breath shaking. I was scared, she said finally, her voice cracking. I was scared of being nothing, of living in your shadow, in your father's shadow. Alex, he promised me something different, something more. More. I echoed, my voice a quiet blade. You traded everything real for something that was never yours to take. She flinched, her shoulders shaking. I know, she said. I know I ruined it. But I never stopped loving you, Mark. I swear, I never stopped. I stared at her, the words like poison in my ears. I wanted to believe her, God. Part of me still wanted to believe her. But the truth was there, stark and cold between us. You can keep your love, Claire, I said softly. I'm done carrying the weight of your lies. I walked out of the house that night, the door closing behind me with a quiet finality. The air was crisp and cool, the stars bright overhead, as if the universe itself was watching and waiting for what came next. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs, steadying me. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the lies, the years of love twisted into something I barely recognized, settled around my shoulders like a heavy cloak. But underneath it, there was something else, the quiet certainty that comes when a man finally sees the battlefield for what it is. I drove through the sleeping city, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows across the empty roads. My mind was clear, focused, every thought sharp as a blade. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the memory of my father, for the legacy he'd built with his own 2 hands, for the man he'd raised me to be. When I reached the lawyer's office, Jack was already there, waiting. He rose as I entered, his expression calm but resolute. It's done, he said quietly. The papers are filed. Claire has no claim left, no assets, no leverage. She's lost everything. I nodded, the weight of his words settling in my chest like a final seal. Good, I said simply. She took enough. She doesn't get to take anything else. Jack studied me for a moment, his eyes searching mine. "You're sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I'm ready," I said. "More than I've ever been." We shook hands, the quiet solidarity of men who knew the cost of war. As I left his office, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a sense of closure, of finality. The war was over, and I'd won. But even as I walked away, I knew the scars would stay. Some battles never truly end. But a soldier learns to live with them, to carry them like medals, reminders of what he's fought for and what he's lost. And as I stepped back into the night, I knew this. Justice had been served, and I was done looking back. The next morning, the house felt different, emptier, as if the walls themselves were exhaling the secrets they'd held for so long. Claire was gone when I woke, her side of the bed cold and untouched. I didn't need to ask where she'd gone. There was nothing left for her here. I stood at the window, the early light spilling across the garden she'd once tended with such careful pride. The roses were still there, bright and defiant, their blooms a silent testament to the truth that had finally been unearthed. I spent the morning packing up her things, her clothes, her perfumes, the little trinkets she'd scattered around the house like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. Each piece was a memory, a lie she'd woven so tightly around my heart that I'd almost believed it was real. I set her suitcase by the door, the final line drawn in a war that had left us both changed. When she finally came back, her eyes were red-rimmed, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her own choices. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the doorway, staring at the suitcase like it was a coffin. "You have what you need," I said quietly. "It's time to go." She looked at me, her lips trembling. "Is this really it, Mark? After everything?" I met her gaze without flinching. "This was your choice, Claire. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." For a moment, I saw the woman she used to be, the girl who had once laughed with me under the summer sun, who had whispered promises in the dark. But that girl was gone, lost in the wreckage of the lies she'd built. She nodded, her shoulders sagging. Without another word, she picked up the suitcase and walked out, the door closing softly behind her. I stood there for a long moment, the quiet of the house wrapping around me like a bomb. The war was over, and the battlefield was mine alone now. And though the house was emptier, it felt cleaner somehow. Free. The shattered crown she'd tried to wear lay in ruins at my feet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. That night, I sat alone in my father's study, the room lit by the soft glow of the fireplace. The flickering light danced across the framed photos on the mantel, snapshots of a life that felt both distant and achingly close. My father in his uniform, my mother's gentle smile, me as a boy, eyes bright and unbroken. I leaned back in the worn leather chair, my father's watch heavy on my wrist, ticking out a steady rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The war was over, but the echoes of it lingered in the quiet, ghosts of laughter, the soft hum of her voice, the promises she'd made in the dark. I let the memories come, each one a jagged shard that cut deep but clean. I remembered the way she'd laughed, the way her hand had fit so perfectly in mine, the way she'd looked at me like I was the only man in the world. Lies, all of it, but once they'd been my truth. A soldier learns to carry his scars, to let them become a part of who he is. And as I sat there, the weight of everything we'd lost and everything I'd gained settled around me like a second skin. I wasn't the same man who had walked into this house all those years ago, heart open and blind to the darkness waiting in the corners. I was stronger now, harder, wiser. The fire crackled softly, the warmth of it a quiet promise that life would go on, that there would be new battles, new scars, but also new dawns, new chances to rebuild. I closed my eyes, the quiet strength of my father's words echoing in my mind. A soldier never quits. He never backs down. And as the flames burned low, I knew this much was true. The war was over, but I was still standing. And that was enough. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, the air sharp with the promise of a new beginning. I stood in the doorway of my father's office, my office now, the weight of his legacy a steady presence at my back. The walls smelled of old wood and paper, a quiet testament to the decades he'd spent building something that would outlast him. I walked to the desk, running my fingers over the polished surface, the memories flooding back in quiet waves. My father's voice, low and steady, teaching me what it meant to lead with honor. The quiet pride in his eyes whenever he looked at me. This company was more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It was a testament to everything he believed in. The staff gathered in the main conference room, their eyes wary but hopeful. They'd seen the cracks forming over the past year, watched as the woman who had worn my ring tried to turn this place into her playground. But today, the uncertainty was gone, replaced by something solid and unyielding. I stood at the head of the table, my hands steady, my voice calm. "We've been through a lot," I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "But my father built this company on trust, on loyalty. And that's exactly what we're going to bring back." They nodded, quiet murmurs of agreement filling the room. I saw it in their faces, the relief, the respect, the quiet determination to see this through. Together, we would rebuild. Together, we would make this company stronger than it had ever been. As the meeting ended, Jack lingered by the door, his expression thoughtful. "You've got this, Mark," he said, his voice steady. "You're exactly the man your father always knew you'd be." I smiled faintly, the weight of his words like a quiet benediction. "I won't let him down," I said, "or any of you." The day stretched out before me, bright and full of promise. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. And I was ready to carry it forward, not as a soldier, but as the man my father had always believed I could be. That evening, I returned home to a house that felt both familiar and strange, like a wound that had finally started to heal. The air smelled of fresh paint and polished wood, the quiet hum of the heater a soothing backdrop to the gentle hush of the evening. I walked through each room slowly, my footsteps deliberate. The bedroom felt different without her perfume lingering in the air. The kitchen was quiet, the silence warm instead of suffocating. Every corner of this house held memories, some sweet, some sharp, but for the first time in a long time, they didn't cut so deep. I stopped in the garden, the roses bright in the soft glow of the porch light. I knelt, my fingers brushing the petals, the earth cool and alive beneath my hands. These were the things she couldn't take from me, things that grew despite the storms. Inside, I found the photo of my father, the one of him laughing in the sun, his arm around my mother, the joy in his eyes bright and undimmed. I set it on the mantel, a quiet promise to carry him forward, to keep him close as I rebuilt the life she tried to steal. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the warmth of it settling in my chest. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and I felt a quiet pride in the man who had come out the other side. Stronger, wiser, still standing. The house was mine again, the quiet of it a balm instead of a prison. And as I sat by the window, the night stretching out before me, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to settle into something that felt like normal. The company was strong again, the staff steady and focused, their quiet loyalty a reflection of the trust we'd rebuilt together. The house was filled with light, the rooms warm with the promise of new memories waiting to be made. If there were children in this story, ours or hers, I fought for them too. I made sure they knew the truth, that they grew up in a home where love wasn't a lie whispered in the dark. The courts ruled in my favor, the evidence undeniable. And when the final papers were signed, I held them close, their small hands wrapped around my fingers like anchors. We spent our days in the garden, planting new roses, watching them bloom in the soft light of dawn. At night, I read to them from my father's old books, the sound of their laughter a balm that filled every corner of the house. In their smiles, I saw the best parts of what we'd lost and what we'd found again. The weight of what had come before was still there, a scar, a lesson, but it didn't define us anymore. We were building something new, something real, one small step at a time. I taught them what my father had taught me, that honor matters, that family is more than blood, that strength isn't measured in how hard you hit, but in how hard you stand when the world tries to break you. They listened, their eyes bright and eager, their laughter ringing out like a promise to the future. And every time I looked at them, I knew we'd already won. Spring came soft and green, the air warm with the scent of new growth. I spent my mornings in the garden, the earth cool and alive beneath my hands. Each seed I planted felt like a quiet prayer, each bloom a testament to the promise that life goes on. One afternoon, I found a message waiting for me, a note slipped into the mailbox, the handwriting familiar but different. It was from an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years, someone who had once known the man I used to be. I heard what happened. The note read, "If you ever need a hand, if you ever want to start over, I'm here." I read the words again and again, the quiet promise in them like a breath of fresh air. I thought about what it meant to start over, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. And for the first time in a long time, the idea didn't feel like a weight, it felt like hope. That night, I sat on the porch, the stars bright overhead, the quiet hum of the world settling around me. I thought about the battles I'd fought, the ghosts I'd laid to rest. And I thought about the future, about what it might mean to open my heart again, to let someone else in. I didn't have all the answers. But as I watched the roses sway in the soft night breeze, I knew one thing for sure, the war was over. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I raised my glass to the sky, the bourbon warm in my hand, and let the quiet hope of the night settle around me like a promise. The day I signed the final divorce papers was one of quiet finality. Claire sat across from me in the lawyer's office, her face pale, her eyes downcast. She wore a simple black coat, her hair pulled back in a tight braid, her usual confident veneer gone. The woman who had once commanded every room with her beauty and charm now seemed small shadows of defeat in every line of her posture. The lawyer's voice was calm as he explained the terms, his words measured and emotionless. "These documents finalize the dissolution of your marriage," he said, sliding the papers across the polished wood table. "Once you both sign, it will be official." Claire picked up the pen with a trembling hand, her fingers white against the silver barrel. She hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, but the words never came. Instead, she just let out a small sigh and signed her name with a flourish, her shoulders sagging in resignation. I took the pen when it was my turn, my hand steady. My signature was neat and unhurried, each letter a quiet statement of everything I was leaving behind. When I was done, I set the pen down and looked up at her. "Goodbye, Claire," I said softly. My voice didn't shake. There was no anger left, no bitterness, only the calm that comes when a storm has finally passed. She looked at me then, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. "Mark," she said, her voice a whisper. "I'm sorry." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "I know," I said. And I did. In some small way, I knew she meant it. But that didn't change what she'd done or what we'd lost. The lawyer gathered the papers, his movements precise and quiet. As Claire stood to leave, she paused for a moment in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the afternoon light. For a heartbeat, she looked back at me. One final glance, one last piece of unfinished business. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her like the final note of a song that had played too long. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, the weight of the last year settling around me like a heavy coat. It was done. Finished. The final chapter closed. The weeks that followed were a quiet testament to the truth that healing isn't always loud or triumphant. It's in the small, steady moments of rebuilding. I found solace in the routines I'd once taken for granted. The morning coffee brewed in silence, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet, the soft hum of the radio in the corner of the kitchen. The house that had once been a battlefield was now a sanctuary, each room a testament to the man I'd become. The laughter of my children echoed in the hallways, their joy a balm that smoothed the rough edges of the scars I carried. I took comfort in the simple things, the warmth of the sun on my face, the scent of the roses in the garden, the steady rhythm of life moving forward. One evening, I sat in the garden as the sun dipped low, the light turning everything to gold. My children played in the grass, their laughter ringing out like music. I watched them, my heart swelling with a quiet pride. They were my reason, my anchor. And in their bright eyes, I saw a future I hadn't dared to imagine. Jack visited sometimes, his quiet strength a reminder that some bonds don't break, no matter the storms. We shared a drink under the wide sky, the silence between us companionable. "You did it," he said one night, his voice low and steady. "You took back everything she tried to steal." I nodded, my gaze steady. "I did," I said. "But it's more than that. I found something she could never touch, my own strength." He smiled faintly, raising his glass. "To the soldier who never surrendered." I lifted my own glass, the amber liquid catching the last light of the day. "To honor," I said quietly. "To family. To starting over." The clink of glass was soft, but final, a quiet promise of everything that still lay ahead. And as the stars began to bloom in the darkening sky, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The dawn was slow and gentle, the light of a new day creeping through the curtains like a quiet blessing. I stood at the edge of the garden, the roses bright with dew, their petals opening to the sun like small, defiant miracles. Each breath of fresh air felt like a promise kept, each shift of the wind a reminder that even the fiercest storms eventually give way to calm. The children were playing on the grass, their laughter bright and honest. I watched them, my heart steady, my mind quiet. In that soft morning light, I felt the echo of every battle I'd fought, the wars in far-off lands, the silent battles in my own home. And I knew that every wound, every scar, had led me here, to this moment of peace. I walked through the garden, the soft earth firm under my feet. My father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, a quiet heartbeat of legacy and strength. I thought of the man who had raised me, who had taught me that real strength isn't in the fight. It's in the quiet determination to stand your ground, to protect what matters most. Inside, the house was warm and bright. The walls that had once echoed with suspicion and whispered lies were filled now with laughter and quiet hope. Every corner was a testament to resilience, to the belief that no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how heavy the loss, you can always choose to begin again. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee warming my hands. Outside, the children ran in circles, their faces lit with joy. In that simple scene, I saw the future, the life I'd fought for, the life that was finally fully mine. I thought about the journey, the heartbreak, the revelations, the final reckoning that had stripped away every lie. And I realized that though I'd lost so much, I'd found something even greater, myself. I closed my eyes and let the moment sink into my bones. The soldier in me knew the war was over, but the man in me knew that life would always bring new battles, and I was ready for them all. As I watched the morning unfold, I found myself wondering, what would you have done? If you were me, standing on the edge of a life remade, would you have walked away? Or would you have stayed and fought for what mattered most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Share your stories, your hopes, your scars. Let's build a community of strength and honesty, one where no lie can survive the light. And if you felt something in this journey, if this story spoke to you, even for a moment, give it a like and subscribe. Not just for me, but for every soldier who's ever fought a war in silence. For every heart that's learned to stand tall, no matter how hard the world tries to break it. Because in the end, that's what matters most. Where are you watching from, friends? Tell me below. And remember, always stand tall. Always fight for what matters. Always live